Welcome to the January 2025 edition of Claude 101 in this series where I give you a beginner's guide for each of the leading frontier models and show you some of the tips and tricks that I'm using to really push these tools to their best. Now, if you've not heard of Claude or not heard of Anthropic, who make Claude, well, who are they? Well, it's a US AI model vendor. They were founded by many of the team from OpenAI, who you may know of from ChatGPT. So they very much come from that core heritage. And as it stands, Claude from Anthropic is the second most adopted AI model in business after ChatGPT and is getting a very passionate following. The different models they have, all called Claude in some form or other. The one that is most commonly used and the one that I use daily is Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which is their most recent release. And then above that, they have Opus, which is for more complex and more in-depth writing and reasoning tasks. And then Claude 3 Haiku, which is for a much lighter model for shorter and easier queries. Now, as I say, Claude 3.5 Sonnet is the one that I use every single day. And whilst you shouldn't have favorites in the AI space, Claude is definitely, it's the model that I go to over and above ChatGPT. And I think, as we'll touch on in a little while, it feels more human. It feels more personal. When I chat to Claude, I'm talking as if I'm talking to another person. Whereas maybe with ChatGPT, I feel like I'm talking to a machine. And that's definitely a lot of the feedback that comes back from other people that use Claude for coding or for writing. I mentioned that it is the second most adopted amongst enterprise customers. And what you can see on the screen here is in the top chart is where we were in 2023. So good, 2 years ago from now. And at that point, ChatGPT, OpenAI, well out in front with 50% of the market and Anthropic just 12%. But look what has happened in the following 12 months through 2024. Well, now ChatGPT, OpenAI at 34% and Anthropic, Claude up to 24%. So it's definitely getting the momentum in the business users. So how do you use Claude? What are the different licenses that you might come across? Well, for starting as an individual, you're going to be able to get a free account. That's going to give you a limited amount of access to a limited amount of models and features. When you go up to the pro account, you start to get access to some more models and also some things like projects, which I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. And that's $20 or so, which is kind of the going rate for these paid versions of these tools. Then, if you're rolling it out across a team in a company, they provide a team license, which is around $30 per user per month, and that's a minimum of 5 people. That also gives you more capacity, a little bit more functionality around sharing things between people in your team. Or you go up to the enterprise, which is a price on application depending on what you are going to be using and how many people. And there you get into much higher levels of compliance. You get into single sign-on, and you get into much larger context windows for much larger business use cases. And then also there is a developer or API account, which you can sign up for if you are a developer, and that allows you to use the Claude model through your applications, and that is based on a usage rather than the number of users. So those are the models, and if you're looking at Claude for the first time, you're likely to be on either the free or the pro account. Now, having got yourself signed up, how are you going to use this model? Well, most commonly people, excuse me, most commonly people are going to be using it through the website, and I'll show you a little bit about that through your browser. You might have the mobile app, whether you're on Android or on iOS, and I'll give you a quick look at that. You might use it on your desktop, and I'll show you a little bit about that as well. And then if you're a developer, you can access it if you've got set up with an API account, then you can access it via that. I'm not going to cover that in this basic session today. So desktop. Well, you download it on your Mac desktop or on your PC, and you'll then be able to see this in your toolbar. Now, why would you use that rather than using it in your browser? Well, two things. One, it's just super easy to access it. So by default, if you're on a Mac, you have the shortcut. You just type Option and space, or you can configure that to another shortcut if you want. And that will just bring up Claude over what you have on your screen. So this is the second advantage, that if you're working in your browser and maybe you're writing a document, maybe you're researching something, and you want to ask Claude something, well, you don't want to have to constantly be changing tabs in your browser to access Claude via a different browser tab. So here, Option space, and then suddenly you've got Claude coming up and you can chat over the top of the work that you're doing. Now, there is a lot of work that Anthropic need to do on the desktop, and as I'm going to show you in the mobile. If you're using ChatGPT, you'll know that you can start to access some tools, and there's various different things that you can do in their desktop app. And we don't have that here. It is really basic start a chat. So there's work to do on that. Mobile as well, there is work to do. It's a fairly simple app. You download it on your phone, iOS or Android, and you are able to ask a chat. You can access some of the projects that I'm going to talk about in a moment, but there is nothing really beyond what you could do in the mobile app. If you are using ChatGPT, then you may have played around with advanced voice, and you may have played with screen sharing. We certainly don't have that capability here, but it's a nice, nice simple app, and you can use the dictating to be able to talk to it rather than type in your request. But now let's get into the web interface, which is where, certainly for me, I spend most of my time playing around with Claude. And as I say, it is on my screen all day, and it's just my go-to for any task that I'm trying to do. I'm going to walk you through a couple of the settings that you might want to get set up before you start. I'm going to introduce you to styles, where you can customize the responses that Claude provides you. I'm going to show you projects, which is my favorite feature, and then artifacts as well. So settings. Having set up your Claude account, then you'll go down to the bottom left, you'll click on your profile, and you'll be able to go to the settings. A couple of things that you can do here. One, what best describes your work? So I've put myself in as product management, but in here in the drop down, you'll see human resources, finance, sales, marketing. And this just helps Claude to understand a little bit about what you're trying to do and how it can best support you. You can then write a bit of your personal preferences about how Claude should consider what you're trying to do. So for me, myself, I'm a consultant. I'm providing AI strategy and change management services to businesses, but I'm also the founder of an AI-powered platform that helps technology buying teams to run a great process. And this are some of the technologies that I've used to build Koala, and I'm based in the UK. You can write a little bit more about yourself and the types of business that you work in, and maybe your role and who you work with, how you like to interact. It'll just help Claude to provide a more personalized interaction. And this, for me, is really why I feel like with Claude, I'm talking to a person rather than to a machine. It just knows how to interact with me. Further down in the settings, I just have all these turned on. So enable artifacts, I'm going to show you what they are in a moment. Enable prompt examples, so that's when you go to Claude, it suggests some questions based on what it knows about you. And then the final one at the bottom here, if you are a Google Workspace customer, then I would connect up to your Google Drive, and I'll show you why that is beneficial to you in a moment. So that was settings. Next up is styles. And whenever you go to write a prompt for Claude, you're going to see this choose style icon. And out of the box, it's got these four standard styles. So a normal, concise, explanatory, or formal. If I'm trying to learn a new topic, something that I'm not really familiar with, and it's quite complex, then I'll default to explanatory. I really want quite a verbose response that treats me like a beginner and helps me. If I'm writing content for a proposal maybe, or a response to a customer, then I might ask for it to be a bit more formal. So these are the standard styles, and you can play around with that and see how things improve. But at the bottom here, you can see create and edit styles, where you can start to create your own. And why might you do that? Well, let's think about what your role is. You might work in the marketing department, and you might be writing some how-to guides which are going to help your customers to use your product. And you may have a company-specific brand style or tone of voice. And so when we're working with Claude to help create that documentation, we want Claude to write in that style. You might be a developer and you are writing technical documentation, and that is a very different style, very more matter-of-fact and to the point, and therefore we'd have a different style for that. So we can create our style, and in this example, I've just created one because I have to translate quite complex technology and artificial intelligence concepts to the business users that I'm working with. And I personally like to use a lot of analogies and metaphors to bring it to life, where people can go, okay, I can understand what you're talking about there. And so I created a style here where that is exactly what Claude will help. When I'm asking it to help me to document something, it's going to provide these analogies and metaphors. Now, when it comes to me actually asking Claude, and if I'm actually working on creating a talk track for a presentation, then I can use my tech translator style, and that is what Claude is going to use to guide the content that it provides. So you might have 2 or 3 of these, depending on how you communicate internally, externally to customers, or any other use case that you've got. So that's styles. Now let me bring you to projects. And for me, projects is the killer feature of Claude. It is the thing that I use in every single conversation that I have with Claude. In fact, I can very rarely think of a situation when I would start a chat and I'm not in a project. So how does it work? Over on the left-hand side of your sidebar, when you're in Claude, you will see a project button. And then you can also see here, I've starred a number of projects for my consultancy, for the proposals I'm creating, for the project, the product that I have built. So they're easy to access. Over on the right, I've got an example of a project. And in this example, I'm imagining I'm a manager and I've created a project for one of my direct reports. I might have one for each of my direct reports. And on the right-hand side, you've got your project knowledge. So firstly, I haven't expanded it there, but I've got some basic instructions. I'm a manager in Acme's legal team. I've got 10 direct reports. And then I go on to explain that I want this project to help me to coach and guide Jack through our interactions. Now, how am I going to give Claude that knowledge? Well, I've added some specific content. And this is where the linking of your Google Drive comes in. So I've been able to link in here the one-to-one notes, the ongoing document that I have with Jack as we have our interactions each week. Maybe there was a disc or an assessment report that was done on Jack last year, and I've uploaded that. Maybe I've agreed with Jack some objectives, some goals for this year. Maybe we've got a performance review that was handled in Workday last year. And so all of these things become the context for a project. Now, you don't have to just have Google Docs. You can upload PDFs. You can upload spreadsheets. You can even just write in text if you want. But this is about giving this project the knowledge. It then means that when you're going to ask the project, in this example, I'm preparing for my first one-to-one with Jack, using what you know, can you help me come up with some stretch objectives? Claude knows all of that context. And so you don't have to provide it all every time you're asking a question. So here's an example. I use a project as a proposal generator. In the knowledge for that project, I've given it all of the background of how I like my proposals to look. And I've asked it to run me through almost kind of a workshop type environment to build out that proposal. So my prompt only needs to be, please help me build a proposal. And Claude's automatically coming back with, I'm happy to, can you provide me the name of the client's company, the buyer, and the name of the project? Because that's what I've provided in the project knowledge. And in the same way, you can use this for all manner of different situations. You might have one for a customer. You might have one for a supplier. You might have one for a different role or team that you work alongside. There could be a specific process that you're involved with in your role or that sits in the company. There may be a policy, maybe an external policy or government regulation, or maybe an internal policy like your expenses policy or your social media policy that you want to be able to chat with. Or maybe there's a template, like in this example, I've got a template for a proposal and I want you to help me to fill it out each time. I have hundreds of projects. Every time I work with a new customer, I set up a project. Every time I start working with a new colleague, I set up a new project. It's just the default for how I work, and it just allows me to go so much faster. As well as getting the project from the main project screen, this is a good starting place as well. Once you've set up your projects, then just coming into Claude at the start of the morning, you start typing in the main screen that's in front of you, and then you can click this user project and it will bring up your most recent projects, or you can search for them. And that's just a nice way. It just reduces a click in terms of getting your projects assigned to your chats. And then the final tip or trick that I'd show you is artifacts. So often you'll be using Claude to create content. Now that could be written content, or it might be code if you are a developer. And if that comes back in line in the chat, then it can be quite difficult to work on different versions or to get things updated. So by enabling artifacts in that setting that I showed you earlier, then when you're asking Claude a question, in this example, I'm asking it to help me create an example that I'm going to use in part of my prompt. It's creating this as an artifact and opening it on the right-hand side of the screen. That gives me a couple of benefits. So one, I can carry on chatting on the left while I keep seeing the document. But I can also highlight sections of this artifact. I can then ask questions to improve that section of the artifact. And down at the bottom right of this, where you can see publish, there are buttons to copy that content, which you can then go and put it into another document. You can download it, or indeed you can add it to the specific project. So it's always there when you come back to your project. So those are artifacts and really, really handy. And I use them on a daily basis in my projects as well. Now, in the spirit of no happy talk, if there's one thing that really does cause a little bit of pain with Claude, it is this. That when you have very, very long chats, and I seem to have them quite regularly, you will start to see a button that pops up saying long chats cause you to hit your limits. Do you want to start a new chat? And then if you carry on talking, then you get this warning, which says that you've reached your limit and you cannot chat again until a certain time, unless you use their different model. So I do find that where I'm doing some detailed work with Claude, I'm often encouraged that I've got to start a new chat, and then you lose some of that context. Now, I do know that the Anthropic team are working fast to try and solve this by providing more capacity that's going to allow them to remove these limits. But I do want to highlight that. Many people won't hit these limits, but if you see it, this is just one of the challenges that we have to deal with right now. Right, starting to wrap up, privacy and governance. When we're using these models in our business context, we're always thinking about, is the information that I'm loading up being used to train the models? Well, for Anthropic, for Claude, the good news is by default, absolutely not. So on the free and the pro, so these are sort of the personal accounts that you might be using, the default is not to train. And from their consumer terms of service, we will not train our models on any materials. So that's your prompts. It's any of the files that you upload that are not publicly available, except if you provide feedback regarding the materials. So maybe you provided a response back saying, can you explain why this or why that? Or if your materials are flagged for trust and safety review. So if you've uploaded anything inappropriate, then it may be flagged up. On the team or enterprise, sort of the corporate account, so again, the default is not to train. Anthropic may not train models on customer content from paid services. And I'll provide you the link to both of those terms of service in a moment. So wrapping up, my considerations for all of these AI models, they will continue to get better and get cheaper. So I always encourage people to use multiple models from multiple providers. Whilst Claude is my go-to, I always have ChatGPT open in another tab. I'm playing around with Gemini. I'm testing DeepSeek and any new models that are coming through so that I can figure out how these models compare against each other. But continue to just assume that the worst model you'll ever use is the one that you're using today, and it will get better and better and better. Secondly, in a business context, it's great that you can use these things individually, but they really become powerful when you are sharing what you're doing across your colleagues. And that is where these team and enterprise licenses come in. You're going to have the ability to share a project. So imagine having a project for one of your accounts, and both your SDR, your sales team, your support team, and maybe the product team are in this project, able to discuss the approach as you plan for a quarterly business review. You also get the additional governance around single sign-on and the compliance that you're going to need for a larger organization. So definitely take a look at those. And finally, same with all models, I recommend that you should have one or two of your most challenging problems written up as a prompt, where if you could solve this problem, it would completely disrupt your industry and transform your business's trajectory. The current models may be nowhere near solving that problem today, but as Anthropic drop new models, you want to be testing them immediately against your most challenging problems so that you're ahead of the curve when you're able to solve those challenges. So for more information, go to anthropic.com/pricing to see all of the different personal and corporate plans. Go to the different terms of use for both consumer, for the free and the pro, and for the commercial terms for the teams and the enterprise, and just get yourself confident that you can use this for your confidential intellectual property. And with that, thank you very much. That is the January edition of the Claude Anthropic 101. And really look forward to hearing your questions and knowing how we can improve these in future months.